The young waitress offered a coffee to the janitor, unaware that he was a millionaire in disguise. When he returned with an offer that would change her life, everyone around was in shock. Angela's alarm went off at 4:45 a.m. The sound cut through the quiet, jarring and loud. She reached over, half asleep, and hit the snooze button. But she knew she couldn't afford those extra minutes. Her shift started at 6, and missing the bus wasn't an option. She threw her legs over the side of the bed, her feet meeting the cold floor. She looked over at her sister, Maria, still asleep on the other side of their small room. Angela rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off the sleepiness. She grabbed her uniform from the chair in the corner. It was simple: dark pants and a neat polo shirt. She ironed it every night, even if she was exhausted. Appearance mattered. It was all she could control. She quietly made her way to the bathroom, splashed her face with cold water, and stared at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were tired, deep circles under them that makeup couldn't really hide. She brushed her teeth and ran a comb through her short hair, tying it back as neatly as she could. The kitchen was barely big enough for one person, but Angela moved around it like she knew every inch. She made coffee, enough for her and her sister. The place was too quiet, with the hum of the old refrigerator being the only background noise. She scribbled a quick note for Maria, "Don't forget your lunch," and left it by the coffee cup she set out for her. Angela grabbed her bag and left the apartment, locking the door behind her. Outside, the morning air was cool, and the city still felt half asleep. She made her way down the cracked stairs and out onto the street. It wasn't quite dawn yet, just a hint of light peeking over the tops of the buildings. The bus stop was 3 blocks away, and she walked fast, her footsteps echoing in the quiet. The bus was mostly empty. She took her usual seat, somewhere in the middle, close enough to the driver but not too close to be in anyone's way. She looked out the window as the city slowly came to life, people heading to work, the first few cars on the road, shopkeepers starting to open up. The ride took about 30 minutes. Angela spent the time thinking about the day ahead. Bills were piling up, and rent was due soon. There was also Maria's tuition, and Angela knew they were running out of time to make it all work. She tapped her fingers against her knee, a nervous habit she couldn't shake. At the cafe, she slipped in through the side door, meant for employees. The familiar smell of coffee beans and breakfast pastries hit her. It was always comforting. She put her things away in her locker, changed into her work shoes, and stepped behind the counter. The place was already starting to fill up with the early crowd, people in suits, tired workers, everyone needing their caffeine fix before the day really started. Angela greeted her co-workers, mostly with nods and quick smiles. There was no time for small talk, not now. "Angela, the front counter, please," her manager Carla called out. "Got it," Angela answered, tightening her apron. She took her place at the register, greeting each customer in turn. "Good morning. What can I get started for you today?" She moved quickly, her hands working on autopilot as she made drinks, took orders, and tried to keep the line moving. In the middle of all the suits and high heels, Angela noticed the older man out front, sweeping the sidewalk. He was there every day. His clothes were always a little worn, his shoes scuffed. Today he looked more tired than usual. His broom moved slowly, his shoulders slumped. Angela watched him out of the corner of her eye as she worked, unable to shake a sense of familiarity. There was something in the way he carried himself that reminded her of her father. "Hey, Angela, you okay?" Her co-worker Susan nudged her, snapping her back to the present. "Yeah, just thinking." "Sorry," Angela said, shaking her head and focusing back on the customer in front of her. By the time the rush started dying down, it was nearing noon, and Angela was already exhausted. The manager gave her a short break, and Angela took the opportunity to step outside. She leaned against the wall of the cafe, watching the man still sweeping, moving from the sidewalk to the street corner. It was a hot day, and she could feel the sun starting to burn against her skin. Angela took a deep breath, then walked back inside. She filled a cup with iced coffee. Nothing fancy, just black with a bit of sugar. It wasn't on the house. She'd have to pay for it later, but she didn't care. She went back outside, the cold cup in her hand, and approached the man. "Hey," Angela called, her voice soft. The man looked up, startled for a second, then smiled politely. "Hello," he replied. I thought you might like something to cool off with." Angela extended the cup toward him. "It's really hot out here today." The man looked at her, then at the coffee. He took it slowly, his hands rough against the plastic. "Thank you, you didn't have to do this." Angela shrugged, a small smile on her face. "I know. Just thought it might help." The man nodded, his eyes tired but kind. "It does. It really does. Thank you. Angela, right?" Angela blinked, surprised. "Yeah. How'd you know?" "I've seen you work here for a while now. Hard not to notice someone like you." He took a sip of the coffee, sighing as the cool liquid hit his throat. "My name's Robert." "Nice to meet you, Robert," Angela said, a bit unsure. She wasn't used to people noticing her. "You're out here every day, huh?" Robert nodded. "Gotta keep the streets clean. Someone's gotta do it." Angela nodded, understanding more than she could say. They stood in silence for a moment before Angela heard Carla calling her name from inside. "Looks like I gotta get back. Take care, okay?" Angela said, giving him a nod. "Thanks again, Angela," Robert said, raising the cup. "This means a lot." Angela went back inside, her heart feeling a little lighter. It wasn't much, but it felt right. She took a deep breath and returned to her station, ready for the next round of orders. The day moved on, but that small moment stuck with her. The next day started much like the last. Angela's alarm went off, loud and unforgiving, at 4:45 a.m. She reached over and silenced it, then sat up, already feeling the exhaustion in her bones. She had stayed up late the previous night, going through bills with Maria, trying to find a way to make it all work. But none of the numbers seemed to add up. She quietly got dressed, slipping into her uniform, and once again left a note next to the coffee she'd set for Maria. She walked the same blocks to the bus stop and took her usual seat. The bus rattled along the street, and Angela tried not to think about the rent or the bills. It was just another day, and all she could do was put one foot in front of the other. When she arrived at the cafe, she stepped inside, the familiar smell of fresh coffee hitting her senses. Carla was there, already giving directions, and the place was filling up with its usual morning crowd. Angela tied on her apron and stepped into position at the counter. The rush was on. Customers lined up and Angela's hands moved fast. It was the usual chaos, orders coming in rapid fire, and her mind barely had time to wander until she saw Robert again, sweeping the sidewalk. She caught glimpses of him through the front window, working diligently in the summer heat, his worn clothes sticking to his back. Around mid-morning, Carla walked up behind Angela, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Take 10, Angela. You've been on your feet all morning." Angela nodded, grateful. She untied her apron and hung it on the hook, stepping outside. It was hotter today. The sun was higher in the sky and there wasn't much shade. Robert was there, just finishing up the corner by the front door. He looked up and smiled when he saw Angela. "Morning, Angela," he greeted her, his voice sounding a bit worn. "Morning, Robert," she replied, smiling back. She hesitated for a second, then walked back inside. She made a beeline to the counter and grabbed another cup. She filled it with iced coffee, just like yesterday. A simple gesture, but it made her feel like she was doing something, anything, to make things a little better. When she stepped back outside, Robert was just starting to move to the next block. "Hey, Robert," she called, walking toward him. Robert turned, surprised. His eyebrows rose when he saw the cup in her hand. "You're doing this again?" he asked, a smile spreading across his face. Angela shrugged, handing him the coffee. "Why not? It's too hot for you to be out here without something to drink." Robert took the cup, his eyes meeting Angela's. There was something behind them, an emotion Angela couldn't quite place. "You're really something, you know that?" he said, shaking his head a little. He took a sip, letting out a satisfied sigh. "Most people just walk past me like I'm not even here." Angela smiled, her lips pulling tight as she looked down. "I guess I don't know. I see you. I mean, you remind me of someone." Robert tilted his head, curious. "Someone close?" "Yeah," Angela nodded. "My dad. He worked as a janitor for most of his life. Worked hard, too hard. I don't know. I guess I think about how I wish someone would have done something nice for him once in a while." Robert was silent for a moment, his eyes studying her. "You're a good person, Angela. The world needs more people like you." Angela chuckled, waving her hand dismissively. "I don't know about that. I'm just trying to get by, same as everyone else." Robert nodded, sipping his coffee. "It's the small things that matter, you know, and you've made my day a little better. Twice now." Angela glanced back at the cafe. She knew her break was almost over, but something about Robert made her want to stay. He was just so genuine, so different from the rushed, indifferent faces she saw every day. "So how long have you been doing this?" she asked, nodding toward his broom. Robert chuckled. "Long enough. Keeps me busy. Plus, I like to think I'm helping keep the city a little nicer. People deserve a clean place to live, right?" "Right," Angela agreed, leaning against the building. "It's just tough, isn't it? No one really sees the work you're doing." Robert shrugged. "Most don't. But people like you who notice, that's enough for me." Before Angela could say anything else, she heard Carla's voice from inside the cafe. "Angela, back in position, please." Angela turned back, giving Robert an apologetic smile. "Duty calls." Robert nodded. "Thanks for the coffee, Angela, I mean it." She nodded and headed back inside, retying her apron as she walked back to the register. She barely had time to think about the exchange with Robert before she was back in the thick of it, taking orders, making drinks, and trying to keep up with the rush. By the end of her shift, Angela was worn out. Her feet hurt, her back ached, and she was ready to get home. As she was taking her apron off and getting ready to leave, Carla approached her. "Hey, Angela, great work today," Carla said. "But listen, someone left this for you." She handed Angela a small, neatly folded note. Angela frowned, taking it. "What is it?" Angela asked, confused. "Don't know. The old guy from outside gave it to me. Said it was for you," Carla replied, nodding toward the door. Angela unfolded the note, her eyes scanning the words quickly. "Meet me tomorrow. I have something to discuss with you. It could change your life." "Robert." Angela blinked, her heart skipping a beat. She read the note again, trying to make sense of it. What could Robert possibly want to discuss with her? What did he mean by change your life? She felt a strange mix of excitement and anxiety bubbling up inside her. "Everything okay?" Carla asked, noticing Angela's expression. Yeah, everything's fine," Angela said, folding the note and slipping it into her pocket. "Just unexpected." Carla nodded, giving Angela a pat on the shoulder. "Well, take care, okay? Get some rest. You deserve it." Angela nodded, her mind still on the note as she gathered her things and left the cafe. The bus ride home was a blur. She kept thinking about Robert's words, trying to figure out what he meant. She couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen, something that could change everything. But whether it was for better or worse, she had no idea. When she got home, Maria was there, books spread across the table, her face buried in notes. "Hey, how was work?" Maria asked, not looking up. "Fine," Angela replied, her voice distant. She pulled the note from her pocket, unfolding it and reading it again. "Something strange happened today." Maria finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. Strange, what do you mean? Angela handed her the note. Maria read it, her eyebrows shooting up. Who is Robert? She asked, her voice skeptical. Just this guy. He works outside the cafe, sweeping the sidewalks, Angela explained. I've been giving him coffee. I just thought it was the right thing to do. Maria shook her head, her face scrunching up. Angela, this sounds weird. What does he mean, change your life? You need to be careful. Angela nodded, but she couldn't help the small flicker of hope inside her. I know, Maria, but what if it's something good? Maria sighed, putting the note down. Just promise me you'll be careful, okay? We don't need any more surprises right now. I promise, Angela said, though her mind was still racing. Tomorrow she would meet Robert, and maybe, just maybe, something would change. The next day, Angela woke up before her alarm went off. The note from Robert had kept her restless all night. She couldn't help but wonder what he had to say. She moved through her morning routine quickly, shower, coffee, uniform. She left the usual note for Maria, but this time she added, Don't worry, I'll be careful. The bus ride to work felt longer than usual. Her eyes kept wandering to her phone, checking the time, watching the city pass by, trying to make sense of her nerves. It was just Robert. Just a simple conversation. But something about his words felt different, like there was a lot more going on than she knew. When she stepped into the cafe, everything seemed normal. The early morning crowd, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, Carla giving instructions to the other workers. Angela tied on her apron and got ready for another long day. The usual rush began almost immediately, and Angela found herself busy taking orders, steaming milk, and calling out names. But her eyes kept drifting outside to the sidewalk, looking for Robert. The thought of what he had to tell her kept pulling her focus. It wasn't until almost noon that Angela saw him. Robert wasn't wearing his usual worn clothes today. Instead, he had on a button-down shirt, clean slacks, and his hair, normally a bit wild, was neatly combed back. He looked so different that Angela almost didn't recognize him. He caught her eye through the window and waved. Angela nodded and turned to Carla, who was working next to her. Hey, Carla, can I take my break now? I really need to step out for a few minutes. Carla looked at her, then out the window at Robert. She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. Go ahead, take 15. Angela untied her apron, hung it up, and stepped outside. Robert was waiting, leaning casually against the wall. You look different, Angela said, unable to hide her surprise. Robert chuckled. Yeah, I guess I clean up okay, huh? Angela nodded, folding her arms. So, what's this about? Your note said something about changing my life? Robert gestured to a bench near the cafe, and they walked over. They sat down, and Robert turned to her, his face serious now. Listen, Angela, I need to tell you something, and it might come as a bit of a shock. Angela frowned, her stomach tightening. What is it? Robert took a deep breath. I'm not just a guy who sweeps the sidewalks. My name is Robert Blackwood. I'm an investor. Real estate, businesses, a little bit of everything. I've been watching you for a while now. How you handle yourself, the way you treat people, even when no one's watching. Angela blinked, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. Wait, what? You're an investor? Robert nodded. Yes, and before you say anything, I know it sounds strange, but I do this sometimes. I go out and see how people really live, how they treat each other, especially those they think don't matter. And Angela, you stood out to me. You went out of your way to show kindness when you had nothing to gain from it. That's rare. Angela sat back, her mind reeling. So, all this time you were just pretending to be a janitor? Robert nodded. I needed to see how people are when they think no one important is looking. And you? You've been nothing but kind and genuine. It impressed me, Angela. It made me realize you're the kind of person I want working with me." Angela stared at him, her heart pounding. This couldn't be real. "Working with you? What do you mean?" Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. He handed it to her. "I'm offering you a position, Angela. Something more than what you're doing now. I want you to come work for me. I think you'd make an incredible manager. Someone who really cares about people, not just the bottom line." Angela looked down at the card. It had his name on it, along with an address downtown and a phone number. She felt like she was in some sort of dream, like none of this could be real. "But I don't know anything about business. I'm just a waitress." Robert shook his head. "You're not just anything, Angela. You're smart and you have a good heart. That's what matters. The rest, you can learn. I'll make sure of it." Angela swallowed, her mouth dry. I don't know. This is a lot." Robert nodded, his expression softening. "I understand. I'm not asking you to decide right now, but I want you to think about it. This could be a real chance for you. Something different, something better. You deserve that, Angela." Angela looked away, her thoughts spinning. She thought about Maria, about the bills, about everything she had struggled with for so long. This could be a way out, a way to finally get ahead. But it also felt terrifying, like stepping into a world she knew nothing about. Robert stood up, giving her a reassuring smile. "Think about it, okay? I'll be here tomorrow if you want to talk more." Angela nodded slowly, still holding the card. "Okay, I'll think about it." Robert turned to leave, but then he paused. He looked back at her, his eyes sincere. "You're better than you think you are, Angela. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." And with that, he walked away, leaving Angela sitting on the bench, staring at the card in her hand. She felt like the ground beneath her was shifting, everything she thought she knew suddenly uncertain. She stayed there for a few more minutes, trying to let it sink in. Then, with a deep breath, she stood up and went back inside. Carla was at the counter, giving her a curious look as she returned. "Everything okay?" Carla asked. Angela hesitated, then nodded, slipping the card into her pocket. "Yeah, just some unexpected news." Carla raised an eyebrow but didn't push. "Well, you better get back to it. The lunch crowd's coming in." Angela tied her apron back on and took her place behind the counter. She tried to focus, but her mind kept wandering back to Robert's words. A job offer. A chance to do something different. To be something more. By the time her shift ended, Angela felt like she was on autopilot. She clocked out, grabbed her things, and made her way to the bus stop. The ride home was a blur, her thoughts spinning in circles. She kept replaying Robert's words in her head. "You're better than you think you are." When she got home, Maria was there as usual, her textbooks spread across the table. She looked up as Angela walked in, her eyes narrowing at the look on Angela's face. "Hey, what happened?" Maria asked, concerned. Angela sat down at the table, pulling the card from her pocket and sliding it across to Maria. Maria picked it up, her eyes widening as she read it. "Robert Blackwood? Isn't he, like, really rich?" Maria looked at Angela, confusion all over her face. "What is this?" Angela sighed, running a hand through her hair. "He wants me to work for him, as a manager or something. He says he's been watching me, that he thinks I'd be good at it." Maria stared at her, then put the card down. "Angela, this is insane. You don't even know him. How can you trust this?" Angela shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know, Maria. But what if he's right? What if this is my chance to do something better, to get us out of this?" Maria's eyes softened and she reached across the table, taking Angela's hand. "I just don't want you to get hurt. This sounds too good to be true." Angela nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I know. But I have to at least think about it, right? I mean, what if this is real?" Maria sighed, squeezing Angela's hand. "Okay, but promise me you'll be careful. Whatever you decide, I'm here, okay?" Angela nodded, her heart pounding. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, something was about to change. The next day, Angela's alarm blared as usual, but instead of her usual feeling of dread, there was something else, a sense of anticipation. She moved through her morning routine, her hands steady, but her mind restless. Robert's words echoed in her head. "You're better than you think you are." She repeated them over and over, hoping to find courage in them. She left her usual note for Maria, reminding her of lunch, and headed to the bus stop. The entire ride, she held Robert's card in her hand, the edges worn from her gripping it so tight. She kept wondering, could she really do it? Could she really step into a completely different world? The cafe was busy, as always, and Angela threw herself into her work, taking orders, steaming milk, greeting the regulars. But every time she looked out the window, she found herself searching for Robert. And sure enough, as the clock neared noon, she saw him again, dressed neatly and waiting by the bench outside. This time, he waved her over without hesitation. Angela untied her apron and went straight to Carla. "Hey, Carla, I need another break just for a few minutes," she said, her voice calm but insistent. Carla gave her a skeptical look, her eyes darting outside. "This is becoming a habit," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Is everything okay?" Angela nodded. "I just need to take care of something. I'll be back soon." Carla sighed, then nodded. "All right, go on. Just don't be too long." Angela stepped outside, her heart pounding as she walked toward Robert. He smiled when he saw her approach. "Angela, I'm glad you came." She folded her arms, trying to keep her composure. "I told you I'd think about it, and I thought about it. But I don't know, Robert, this feels impossible. I'm not qualified for something like that." Robert smiled, nodding. "I get it. It's a big leap. But that's why I want you to come by my office today. Just to see it, meet some people, get a feel for what it's like. You don't have to decide anything right now. Just come take a look." Angela blinked, her stomach tightening. "Today? I can't just leave work." Robert shook his head. "It's just for a bit. I'll take care of things with your boss, don't worry. I think it's important that you see what's possible here." Angela hesitated, her hands trembling. "And what if I'm not good enough? What if I get there and I'm just lost?" Robert stepped closer, his voice soft. "Angela, everyone feels like that at some point. No one starts out knowing everything. The important thing is that you're willing to try. You have the heart for it. The rest, you can learn." Angela looked away, her thoughts swirling. She thought about her father, how hard he had worked, how little he got in return. She thought about Maria, sitting at the kitchen table every night, drowning in textbooks. Maybe this was her chance to finally do something different, to get them both out of the cycle they were stuck in. Finally, Angela nodded. "Okay, I'll come with you. But I'm not promising anything, I just want to see." Robert's smile widened and he nodded. "That's all I'm asking. Come on, let's talk to your boss." They walked inside together and Carla looked up from behind the counter, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of Robert. Angela approached, her heart pounding. "Carla, this is Robert. He has a proposal, and I need to leave for a bit. It won't take too long." Carla raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but Robert stepped forward, extending his hand. "I'm Robert Blackwood. I've offered Angela an opportunity, and I promise she'll be taken care of. I know it's last minute, but I'd really appreciate it if you could let her take the afternoon off." Carla blinked, clearly taken aback. She shook Robert's hand slowly, her eyes darting between him and Angela. "Robert Blackwood, as in the investor?" Robert nodded, his smile polite. "That's right. and I assure you Angela is someone I'd like to work with. She's been an incredible asset here, and I think she can do even more." Carla looked at Angela, her eyes narrowing in confusion. "Angela, is this for real?" Angela nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I think it might be." Carla paused for a moment, then sighed. "All right, go ahead, Angela. Just don't forget where you came from, okay?" Angela smiled, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. "I won't. Thank you, Carla." Robert led Angela out of the cafe and to his car, parked just down the street. It was sleek, expensive. Everything about it screamed money. Angela hesitated for a second before getting in, her heart pounding as the reality of what she was doing sank in. The drive to the office was quiet, but Robert kept glancing over at her, his expression kind. "You're doing great, Angela. I know this is a lot, but just remember, you belong here as much as anyone else." Angela nodded, her fingers twisting in her lap. She wanted to believe him, but it was hard. Everything felt too surreal, too far from the life she knew. When they pulled up in front of the building, Angela felt her breath catch. It was tall, sleek, made of glass and steel, a far cry from the cafe or her tiny apartment. Robert led her inside, through the bustling lobby, past people in suits who barely gave her a glance. He took her up to one of the upper floors, and as the elevator doors opened, Angela found herself looking out at a large, open office space. People moved around quickly, phones rang, papers rustled. It was a world she'd only ever seen from the outside. Robert guided her through the office, introducing her to a few people as they walked. Angela tried to smile, to shake hands and make conversation, but her mind felt overwhelmed. Everyone seemed so polished, so confident. She felt like an imposter, like any second someone would realize she didn't belong. Finally, Robert led her into a conference room, closing the door behind them. He gestured for Angela to sit, and she sank into one of the chairs, her heart still pounding. Robert sat across from her, his eyes warm and understanding. "Angela, I know this is overwhelming," he said, his voice gentle. "But I need you to understand something. You're here because I see something in you that's rare. You care about people. You want to make things better even when it's hard. That's what makes a good leader." Angela looked down at her hands, her throat tightening. "But I don't know anything about this kind of work. I don't know how to be a manager or how to run an office." Robert nodded. "And that's okay. You're not supposed to know everything right away. That's why I'm offering you training, mentorship, whatever you need to feel comfortable. I believe in you, Angela. But the real question is, do you believe in yourself?" Angela felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She thought about all the times she had doubted herself, all the times she had told herself she wasn't good enough. But here was Robert, offering her a chance, something she had never thought possible. She took a deep breath, her voice shaky. I want to try. I'm scared, but I want to try." Robert's smile widened, and he nodded. "That's all I needed to hear. Let's take this one step at a time, okay? We'll start slow, and you'll have all the support you need." Angela nodded, her heart still pounding, but a small glimmer of hope starting to grow inside her. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this. Maybe this was her chance to be something more, to give Maria a better life, to prove to herself that she was capable of more than just getting by. Robert stood, extending his hand to her. "Welcome aboard, Angela." Angela took his hand, her grip firm, her heart racing. "Thank you, Robert. I won't let you down." As they left the conference room, Angela felt the weight of her decision settle in. She had no idea what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was moving forward, like she was stepping into a future that was entirely her own. Angela couldn't focus the rest of the day. When she returned home, her mind felt like it was buzzing with 1,000 different thoughts. Maria was sitting at the table, her textbooks open, her fingers running through her hair as she scribbled notes. Angela walked in, set her bag down, and slumped into the chair across from Maria. Maria looked up, immediately noticing her sister's face. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice cautious. Angela exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "He took me to his office. He wants me to work for him, actually be a manager." Maria's eyes widened, her pen freezing mid-air. "Are you serious? A manager?" Angela nodded, her eyes staring at the table. "Yeah, he says he'll train me, help me learn. He thinks I can do it." Maria put her pen down, leaning back in her chair, her eyes narrowing. "Angela, I don't know. This sounds too good to be true. I mean, he barely knows you." Angela sighed, shaking her head. "I know, Maria. But what if he's right? What if this is my way out? Our way out?" Her voice trembled slightly, her hands shaking in her lap. Maria bit her lip, her face a mixture of concern and hope. "I just don't want you to get hurt. You've worked so hard for everything, and I don't want someone to take advantage of that." Angela's eyes welled up, her emotions bubbling over. "I don't either. But I'm scared, Maria. I don't want to stay stuck forever. I want to do something better, be something better." Her voice broke, and she wiped at her eyes, trying to keep the tears from falling. Maria stood up, walked around the table, and hugged Angela tightly. "I know, sis, I know. Just promise me you'll be careful, okay? If anything feels off, you leave." Angela nodded, hugging her sister back, her chest aching. "I promise." That night, Angela lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind refusing to settle. She kept seeing Robert's office in her mind, the polished people, the suits, the busy atmosphere. She imagined herself there, trying to fit in, trying to learn everything she needed to know. She felt a pit of fear in her stomach, the anxiety of failing making it hard to breathe. She turned over, looking at the small desk where Maria's textbooks were still piled. They were all they had. Education was supposed to be their way out, but for now, it was only piling up debt. Angela closed her eyes, feeling the pressure mounting. Bills, rent, Maria's tuition. It was all on her shoulders. And now this opportunity. This terrifying, impossible opportunity that could change everything. The next morning, Angela woke up with her chest feeling tight. The anxiety was there, the uncertainty of what lay ahead suffocating her. She got up, moved through her morning routine, and tried to calm her breathing. She left Maria's usual note and walked to the bus stop, her heart pounding. She didn't have to work at the cafe today. Robert had given her time to go to his office, to learn about her new role. The thought made her stomach twist. When she got on the bus, she felt a wave of dizziness, her thoughts spiraling out of control. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she embarrassed herself? What if everyone there saw her for what she really was, just a waitress who had no business trying to do anything else? Her palms were sweating, and she gripped the seat in front of her, closing her eyes and trying to take deep breaths. But the fear wouldn't go away. It clung to her, whispering that she was making a mistake, that she was going to fail, that this wasn't meant for her. The bus ride felt like it took forever, and by the time she got off at Robert's office building, Angela felt like she was shaking from the inside out. She walked through the lobby, trying to keep her head up, but she couldn't stop the fear. It was there, telling her to turn around, to leave before it was too late. She made her way to the elevators, her fingers trembling as she pressed the button for Robert's floor. The doors closed, and she leaned back against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. The ride up seemed to take forever, and her heart pounded harder with each passing second. When the doors finally opened, Angela stepped out, her legs feeling shaky. She made her way to Robert's office, and his assistant gave her a warm smile. "Angela, he's expecting you. Go on in," she said, gesturing to the door. Angela nodded, swallowing hard as she walked to the door and knocked. "Come in," Robert's voice called from the other side. Angela opened the door and stepped in. Robert looked up from his desk, smiling when he saw her. "Angela, come on in. Have a seat." Angela sat down, her hands twisting in her lap, her heart still pounding. Robert looked at her for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Angela swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can do this, Robert. I'm scared." Robert nodded, leaning forward, his elbows on his desk. "I understand, Angela. It's completely normal to feel that way. You're stepping into something new, something big. But I need you to understand. You're here because I believe in you. And I wouldn't have offered you this if I didn't think you could do it." Angela looked down, her hands shaking. "But what if I fail? What if I let everyone down?" Robert's voice was soft but firm. "Angela, everyone fails at some point. Everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is that you keep trying, that you don't give up, and I'm here to help you. You're not alone in this." Angela looked up, tears welling in her eyes. "I just don't want to mess this up." Robert nodded, his expression kind. "You won't. Because you care, Angela. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you perfect for this. And I'm going to be with you every step of the way." Angela took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that she could do this. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." Robert smiled, standing up and walking around his desk. He placed a hand on her shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "That's all I'm asking. One step at a time. Today we're just going to meet a few people, get you comfortable. You don't have to do anything more than that." Angela nodded, taking another deep breath. "Okay, let's do this." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Robert took Angela around the office, introducing her to people, explaining what her role would be. Angela did her best to smile, to listen, to remember everyone's names, but the anxiety was still there, like a weight pressing down on her chest. By the time they finished, Angela felt like she was about to collapse. Robert walked her back to his office, giving her an encouraging smile. "You did great today, Angela. I know this is overwhelming, but you handled it well." Angela managed a small smile, her exhaustion clear on her face. "Thank you, I'm just trying to keep up." Robert nodded. "And you're doing just that. Remember, it's one step at a time. You don't have to have it all figured out right now." Angela nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Okay." Robert walked her to the elevator, pressing the button for the lobby. "Get some rest tonight, okay? Tomorrow is a new day, and we'll keep moving forward." Angela nodded as the elevator doors closed. She leaned back against the wall, her eyes closing as she took a deep breath. She had made it through today. She had taken the first step, even though she was terrified, and maybe that was enough for now. When she got home, Maria was waiting, her eyes full of worry. Angela walked in, dropping her bag by the door, and collapsed onto the couch. "How was it?" Maria asked, sitting down next to her. Angela looked at her sister, a tired smile spreading across her face. "It was scary, but I made it through. One step at a time, right?" Maria nodded, hugging Angela tightly. "That's right. One step at a time." Angela closed her eyes, her sister's arms around her, and for the first time that day she felt a small flicker of hope. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she would keep trying. No matter how scared she would keep moving forward. One step at a time. The morning air was thick, almost suffocating, as Angela walked toward Robert's office. Today was the day she would have to decide. She felt the pressure like a vice around her chest, each step closer to that glass building, tightening it further. Robert had given her until today to make a decision, a full commitment or nothing at all. She didn't know if she could do it. She wasn't sure if she was ready to jump into the unknown. Everything about this felt so out of her depth. As she reached the office building, her legs felt weak and her throat was dry. She stopped for a moment at the entrance, staring up at the towering structure of glass and steel. The people going in and out looked so polished, so sure of themselves. Angela felt anything but. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. She leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths, her heart pounding. The doors finally opened, and she made her way to Robert's office. His assistant gave her an encouraging nod as she passed by, but it did little to settle the unease growing in her gut. Angela paused outside Robert's office door, her fingers hesitating on the handle. She took a deep breath, then pushed it open. Robert looked up from his desk, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Angela, come on in," he said, standing and gesturing toward the chair across from him. Angela sat down, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Robert leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk, his eyes meeting hers. "So, Angela, I know today's a big day. I need to know, are you ready to take this on?" Angela looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting together. Her heart felt like it was about to burst out of her chest. She had spent the entire night going back and forth, trying to decide if she could do it, if she could really step into a world that seemed so different from anything she knew. She took a deep breath, looking up at Robert, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to try. I'm scared, but I want to try." Robert smiled, his eyes softening. "That's all I needed to hear, Angela. You've got more strength than you realize, and I'm here to help you every step of the way." Angela nodded, her throat tight. I don't want to let anyone down. I don't want to fail." Robert stood up, walking around the desk and sitting on its edge right in front of her. "Angela, listen to me. Failure is part of the process. Everyone stumbles. What matters is getting back up. I chose you for this because I know you won't give up. You've faced tougher challenges than this." Angela looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "I'm just a waitress. I'm not sure I can be what you need me to be." Robert shook his head, his expression earnest. "You're not just anything, Angela. You're resilient. You're empathetic. Those are the qualities that matter. The rest is just knowledge, and that can be taught." Angela swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "Okay, I'll do it." Robert's face broke into a wide smile and he extended his hand to her. "Welcome aboard, Angela." Angela shook his hand, her grip firm despite the fear still coiled tightly in her chest. "Thank you. I won't let you down." Robert nodded, standing up. "I know you won't. Now let's get started." The rest of the day was a blur of meetings and introductions. Robert introduced her to some of the senior managers, explaining her role and how she'd be shadowing for a few weeks to learn the ropes. Angela tried to absorb everything, her head spinning with information, names, and responsibilities. Each new person she met looked her up and down, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. Angela could see the questions in their eyes. Why her? What made her so special? As the day went on, Angela felt the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on her. She knew they didn't think she belonged there, that she was just some waitress out of her depth, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were right. Each introduction, each explanation of what she would be doing, only made her more aware of how much she didn't know. By the time they were done, Angela was exhausted. Robert walked her to the elevator, giving her an encouraging pat on the shoulder. "You did great today, Angela. I know it's a lot, but take it one day at a time. You'll get there." Angela managed a tired smile, nodding. "Thank you, Robert. I'll do my best." The elevator ride down felt endless. Angela leaned back against the wall, her eyes closing as she tried to steady her breathing. She had said yes. She had committed. But now, standing there alone, she couldn't help but wonder if she had made a mistake. The bus ride home was quiet, Angela staring out the window, watching the city blur past. She thought about everything Robert had said, about the people she had met, about the looks they had given her. It was all so different, so overwhelming. She wasn't sure if she could handle it. When she got home, Maria was waiting as usual. She looked up from her books, her eyes immediately narrowing when she saw Angela's face. "Hey, you okay?" Angela sat down at the table, dropping her bag beside her chair. "I said yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maria's eyes widened, and she set her pen down. "You said yes? To the job?" Angela nodded, her hands trembling slightly. "Yeah, I'm going to do it. I want to do it. But I'm scared, Maria. I don't know if I can actually do this." Maria reached across the table, taking Angela's hand in hers. "You can do this, Angela. I know you can. You've always been the strong one, the one who never gives up. And I know it's scary, but you've got this." Angela looked up at her sister, tears welling in her eyes. I don't want to mess everything up." Maria squeezed her hand, her voice soft but firm. "You won't. Because you care, Angela. You care about people, about doing things right. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you perfect for this." Angela nodded, her chest tightening as she fought back the tears. She wanted to believe her sister, wanted to trust that she could actually do this. But the fear was still there, gnawing at her, whispering that she wasn't good enough, that she was out of her depth. Maria stood up, walking around the table and wrapping her arms around Angela. "You've got this, sis. One step at a time, okay?" Angela nodded, hugging her sister tightly, her chest aching. One step at a time. The next day, Angela went back to Robert's office, her heart pounding as she walked through the lobby, up the elevator, and into the bustling office space. She was introduced to her new team, a group of 4 people who looked at her with a mix of curiosity and politeness. Angela did her best to smile, to make small talk, but she could feel the tension in the air. They were skeptical of her. She could see it in their eyes, the way they hesitated when she spoke. Robert took her through her responsibilities, handling schedules, overseeing team projects, and making sure everything ran smoothly. Angela nodded, trying to keep up, but each new responsibility felt like a weight being added to her shoulders. She knew she was going to make mistakes, and she was terrified of what would happen when she did. By the end of the day, Angela felt like she was running on empty. She had tried to put on a brave face, to act like she belonged, but inside she felt like she was drowning. There was just so much to learn, so much she didn't know. And the looks from her team, the quiet judgment, only made it worse. She rode the bus home in silence, her hands clenched in her lap. She kept replaying the day in her head, every awkward interaction, every moment where she felt lost. When she got home, Maria was there, as always, waiting with a warm smile. "How was it today?" Maria asked, her voice cautious. Angela sat down, letting out a long breath. "It was a lot. I don't know if I'm doing this right, Maria. I feel like I'm just faking it, like I don't really belong." Maria reached over, taking Angela's hand. "You do belong. It's just new, and it's scary. But you'll learn. And you've got people who believe in you. You just need to give yourself some time." Angela nodded, her throat tight. "I hope so. I really want to make this work." Maria smiled, squeezing her hand. "You will. One day at a time." Angela took a deep breath, nodding. She had made her choice. Now she just had to keep going, no matter how scared she felt. One day at a time, one step at a time. She could do this. She had to. The next morning was a blur of nerves for Angela. She woke up with the same tightness in her chest, that gnawing fear in the pit of her stomach. But she got up, she dressed, and she made herself ready. She left a note for Maria that read, "Wish me luck today." Her sister's support was the only thing keeping her from completely losing her mind. The ride to Robert's office was almost mechanical now, and she found herself running through her mental list of things she needed to do, tasks Robert had set for her, meetings to attend, and new names to remember. She knew it was just her second day in this new position, but it felt like she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. The only difference was that she never thought she'd actually make it here. When Angela arrived at the office, she could tell immediately that people were watching her. The whispers, the side glances, she could feel them all. She tried to ignore it, keep her head down, and focus on the work in front of her. Robert had told her that she would be sitting in on some meetings today, just to observe and get a feel for the way things were done. Angela had nodded, but she wasn't entirely sure what she was supposed to be watching for. Her first meeting was with a few of the senior managers. Angela took her seat at the large conference table, her heart pounding in her chest as she looked around. The people seated at the table all seemed so composed, so confident, like they had all done this 1,000 times before. Angela felt small in comparison, unsure of what she was doing there. Robert entered the room, nodding at everyone as he took his place at the head of the table. He glanced at Angela, giving her a reassuring smile. She tried to smile back, but it felt weak, forced. She opened her notebook, ready to take notes, though she wasn't entirely sure what was worth writing down. As the meeting went on, Angela listened to the discussion, the jargon, and the back and forth between the managers. It felt like a different language at times, the business terms flying over her head. She scribbled down things she thought might be important, but half the time she wasn't even sure what they were talking about. There was a moment, halfway through the meeting, when one of the managers, an older man named Stuart, looked directly at Angela. "So, Angela, what are your thoughts on how we should approach this client situation?" he asked, his voice calm, but his eyes sharp. Angela blinked, her heart stopping for a moment. She looked at Robert, who gave her a small nod as if to say, "You've got this." She turned back to Stuart, her mind racing. "Well, she began, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on her. "I think it might be good to maybe focus on building a personal connection with the client. Show them that we understand their needs and that we're here to provide a solution that's tailored to them." She could hear her voice shake slightly, and she hated it. She could feel the doubt creeping in, the fear that she was about to make a fool of herself. Stuart looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Not a bad thought," he said, leaning back in his chair. "We've been a bit too focused on numbers lately. It might help to take a more personal approach." Angela let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She glanced at Robert, who gave her a small, approving nod. She felt a tiny flicker of pride. She had done it. She had spoken up, and she hadn't completely messed it up. Later that day, Robert called Angela into his office. She stepped inside, her heart still pounding from the day's events. Robert gestured for her to sit down, and she did, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "You did well today, Angela," Robert said, his voice warm. "I know that meeting was a lot, but you handled it just fine." Angela looked down, her cheeks flushing slightly. I felt like I didn't know what I was talking about half the time. I'm still trying to understand all of this." Robert nodded, his expression understanding. "And that's completely fine. No one expects you to have all the answers right away. You're here to learn. And from what I've seen, you're picking it up faster than most." Angela looked up, meeting his eyes. "I just don't want to let anyone down. I feel like I'm trying to play catch-up, and everyone else is so far ahead of me." Robert leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. "Angela, let me tell you something. When I started out, I didn't know anything either. I made mistakes, I stumbled, I doubted myself. But I kept going. And that's all I ask of you. Keep going, keep learning, and trust that you're here for a reason." Angela nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you, Robert. I'll keep trying." Robert smiled. "I know you will. And remember, you're not alone in this. If you ever need help, just ask. We're a team." Angela left his office feeling a little lighter. She still had a long way to go, but she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could do this. She had made it through the meeting without falling apart, and that was something. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. The rest of the afternoon was spent at her new desk, going through files, trying to understand the company's clients and what they needed. Angela was still struggling with the jargon, the contracts, and all the information being thrown her way. But she kept at it, her pen scribbling notes, her eyes scanning each document carefully. She wanted to prove that she was worthy of this chance, even if it meant long hours of work and sleepless nights. Around 3 p.m., one of her new team members, a young woman named Erin, approached her desk. Erin had short hair, a quick smile, and seemed genuinely friendly. "Hey, Angela, do you want to grab a coffee downstairs? I could use a break." Angela looked up, surprised by the offer. She smiled, nodding. "Yeah, that sounds good." They made their way to the cafe downstairs, and Angela felt herself relax a little. Erin seemed easygoing, and Angela was grateful for the chance to step away from her desk. As they sat down with their coffees, Erin looked at Angela, her expression curious. "So, how are you holding up? It's got to be a lot, jumping into this so suddenly." Angela nodded, letting out a long breath. "Yeah, it's a lot. I'm trying to keep up, but there's so much to learn. I just don't want to mess up." Erin smiled sympathetically. "We all feel like that at first. I was terrified my first month here, but you'll get the hang of it. And honestly, it helps that Robert believes in you. He doesn't do that lightly." Angela looked down at her coffee, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup. "I just keep thinking that maybe they made a mistake, that I'm not really cut out for this." Erin reached across the table, giving Angela's hand a reassuring squeeze. "Trust me, you're not alone in feeling like that. But you're here for a reason, and from what I've seen, you've got what it takes. Just keep going, okay?" Angela nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Thanks, Erin, I appreciate that." Erin nodded back, her eyes kind. "Anytime. We're all in this together." The rest of the week passed in a similar blur. Meetings, introductions, endless files and documents to go through. Angela's days were long, her mind constantly running, trying to keep up with everything being thrown her way. She was exhausted, her feet aching from standing all day, her eyes burning from staring at her computer screen. But she kept going. Every night when she got home, Maria was there waiting for her, a warm smile on her face. Angela would sit down at the table, and Maria would ask her how her day went. Angela would tell her about the meetings, the people she met, the challenges she faced. And every night Maria would tell her the same thing. "You're doing great, Angela. One step at a time." And that was what Angela held on to. The idea that she didn't have to have everything figured out all at once. She just had to keep going, keep learning, and trust that she would get there eventually. By the end of the week, Angela was starting to feel a little more comfortable. She was getting to know her team, starting to understand the flow of the work, and feeling less like an outsider. She still had a long way to go, but she could see the progress she was making, even if it was just in small steps. Friday evening, as she was leaving the office, Robert called her over. He handed her a folder, smiling. "Angela, you've done great this week. I want you to look over this project over the weekend. It's something I think you could handle next week." Angela took the folder, her eyes widening. "A project? For me?" Robert nodded. "Yes, it's a small one, but I think it'll be good practice. Take your time with it and let me know if you have any questions." Angela nodded, her heart pounding. "Thank you, Robert. I'll do my best." As she left the office that evening, Angela felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. She had been given a project, something real to work on. It was terrifying, but it was also a sign that Robert believed in her. And maybe, just maybe, she could start believing in herself too. When she got home, she showed the folder to Maria, her sister's eyes lighting up. "See? I told you, Angela. You're doing it. You're really doing it." Angela smiled, a small flicker of hope growing in her chest. "One step at a time, right?" Maria nodded, hugging her sister tightly. One step at a time. And for the first time since this whole journey began, Angela felt like maybe she really was capable of doing this. Maybe she really could make a difference, not just for herself, but for Maria too. One step at a time, she was getting there. Monday morning arrived and Angela felt a different kind of pressure on her shoulders. Over the weekend, she had poured hours into studying the project Robert had given her. She went over every document in the folder again and again, until the words were engraved in her mind. The project was a small one, a logistical challenge involving rescheduling for a client's facility upgrade, but even though it was supposed to be straightforward, Angela felt the weight of its importance. It was her first real assignment, her first real chance to prove herself. The bus ride to the office felt even longer than usual. She kept imagining scenarios in her head. What if she made a mistake? What if she completely misunderstood the requirements? What if this was the thing that would finally make Robert realize he had made a mistake in trusting her? By the time she arrived at the office, Angela's palms were sweaty, her heart pounding in her chest. She took a deep breath, stepping out of the elevator and making her way to her desk. Aaron greeted her with a smile. "Hey, Angela. Ready for another crazy week?" she asked, her voice cheerful. Angela forced a smile. "Yeah, I think so. Just hoping I can handle it." Aaron gave her a reassuring nod. "You will. We've all been there, trust me. If you need help, just ask." Angela nodded, thankful for Aaron's support. She set her things down, glancing at the project folder she had brought back with her. She took another deep breath and picked it up, walking toward Robert's office. She had to present her plan, show him what she thought the best approach was. She knocked on the door, feeling her stomach twist. "Come in," Robert's voice called from the other side. Angela stepped inside, giving Robert a nervous smile. He gestured for her to sit. "Angela, good morning. How was your weekend? Did you get a chance to go over the project?" Angela nodded, taking a seat. "Yes, I did. I spent a lot of time going through everything, and I think I have a plan," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Robert leaned back in his chair, nodding. "Good. Let's hear it." Angela opened the folder, her hands trembling slightly. She took another deep breath, focusing on the details she had memorized. "I think the key issue here is making sure the rescheduling impacts the client's workflow as little as possible. So, I've proposed a staggered schedule for the upgrade, splitting it into 2 smaller segments instead of one big move. That way, we can ensure they still have functional capacity while the work is being done." Robert listened, his expression focused. He didn't say anything, and Angela felt her nerves spike, worried she might be completely off base. She continued, pushing herself to keep her voice steady. "I've also listed alternative suppliers in case of any delays with the current contractor. I figured having a backup plan would make the client feel more secure. It's all here in the timeline I drew up." Angela passed the folder over to Robert, her heart pounding as she waited for his response. Robert opened the folder, glancing over the timeline, his brow furrowing slightly in concentration. After what felt like an eternity, he looked up, a smile slowly spreading across his face. "This is excellent, Angela," he said, nodding. "You've thought through all the key points, and I appreciate the contingency planning. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need, anticipating issues before they become problems. You did great work here." Angela's breath caught in her throat, a wave of relief washing over her. She had done it. She hadn't messed it up. She managed a small smile, her heart still pounding. "Thank you, Robert. I wanted to make sure everything was covered." Robert nodded. "And you did. I think the client will be very pleased with this approach. We'll present this later today. Don't worry, I'll take the lead. but I'd like you there with me." Angela blinked, her stomach tightening again. "You want me there in the meeting?" Robert smiled. "Yes, you worked on this, Angela. You should be part of the presentation. I know it's intimidating, but it's important for you to see how these things work firsthand. And remember, I'll be right there with you." Angela swallowed hard, nodding. "Okay, I'll be there." The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Angela tried to focus on her other tasks, but her mind kept drifting to the upcoming meeting. She kept imagining herself sitting in that room, all eyes on her, waiting for her to speak. The idea made her stomach twist with anxiety. When the time finally came, Aaron gave her a thumbs up as she made her way to the conference room. "You've got this, Angela," Aaron said, her smile encouraging. Angela took a deep breath, nodding. She hoped Aaron was right. She walked into the conference room, finding Robert already there, along with 2 other senior managers. The client representatives were seated at the opposite side of the table, 2 men in suits who looked like they belonged there, like they were used to these kinds of meetings. Angela suddenly felt out of place, like a fraud sitting in a room she had no business being in. Robert gestured for her to take a seat beside him, and she did, her hands trembling slightly as she opened her notebook. Robert introduced her, his voice confident. "This is Angela Martinez. She's new to the team and has been working on the logistics for this project." The client representatives nodded at her, polite but clearly curious. Angela forced a smile, her stomach churning. Robert began presenting the proposal, his voice steady, clear, and commanding. Angela listened, trying to absorb the way he spoke, the way he explained everything in a way that made it sound easy, natural. Then Robert looked at Angela, gesturing toward her notes. "Angela, could you elaborate on the contingency plans you put together for the alternative suppliers?" Angela's heart skipped a beat. She took a deep breath, looking down at her notes. She cleared her throat, forcing her voice to come out steady. "Of course. We've identified 2 alternative suppliers that can provide the necessary equipment if the current contractor experiences any delays. Both suppliers have been vetted, and they've confirmed availability within the required timeline." She looked up, trying to gauge the client's reactions. One of the men nodded, his expression approving. "That's good foresight. We appreciate the preparation," he said, his voice genuine. Angela felt a wave of relief, a small smile spreading across her face. "Thank you. We wanted to make sure all bases were covered." The meeting continued, and Angela felt her nerves slowly start to settle. Robert led most of the discussion, but he included her when relevant, and each time Angela spoke, she felt a little more confident. By the end of the meeting, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could handle this after all. When the clients left, Robert turned to Angela, his smile warm. "You did great, Angela, really. This was a good first step." Angela let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, her shoulders relaxing. "Thank you, Robert. I was really nervous, but I'm glad it went well." Robert nodded. "It's natural to be nervous, but you handled it well, and that's what matters. I'm proud of you." Angela smiled, her chest filling with a sense of accomplishment. She had made it through the meeting, she'd spoken up, and she hadn't failed. It was a small step, but it was progress, and that was enough for now. The rest of the day was a little easier. Angela felt a small flicker of confidence as she returned to her desk, her heart a little lighter. She had faced her fears and she had done what she needed to do. She still had a lot to learn, but today had shown her that she could do this. She was capable. Aaron stopped by her desk later in the afternoon, a big smile on her face. "I heard the meeting went really well. See? I knew you could do it." Angela smiled, nodding. "Thanks, Aaron. It was nerve-wracking, but I'm glad it's over." Aaron laughed, giving her a pat on the shoulder. "You'll get used to it, and you're already doing better than most people would in your shoes." Angela's smile grew, her heart swelling with a sense of gratitude. She was starting to feel like she was part of the team, like maybe she did belong here after all. When Angela got home that evening, Maria was waiting, as always, her textbook spread across the table. Angela set her bag down, letting out a long breath as she slumped into the chair beside her sister. Maria looked up, her eyes brightening. "Hey, how'd it go?" Angela smiled, her voice filled with relief. "It went well. I was so nervous, but I made it through, and Robert said I did a good job." Maria's face lit up, her smile wide. "See? I told you, Angela. You're doing it. You're really doing it." Angela nodded, her throat tightening with emotion. "Yeah, I think I might actually be okay at this." Maria reached over, taking Angela's hand and squeezing it. "You're more than okay. You're amazing. And I'm so proud of you." Angela closed her eyes, her heart swelling. She had made it through today, and she knew there would be more challenges ahead. But she also knew that she could face them. One step at a time, she was finding her way. She looked at her sister, her eyes filled with determination. "One step at a time, right?" Maria nodded, her smile never fading. One step at a time. And for the first time, Angela believed it. She believed that she could keep going, keep learning, and keep growing. She was scared, but she was also ready for whatever came next. The next morning, Angela woke up with a sense of determination she hadn't felt in a long time. There was still fear, still that quiet voice in her mind that questioned everything. But there was also something else. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to find her place. She got ready quickly, her uniform replaced now with more formal office attire. She still felt strange in it, like she was wearing someone else's clothes. But the suit made her stand a little taller, and she hoped it made her look like she belonged. She left a note for Maria, as usual, reminding her about dinner and wishing her luck on her exams. Maria's classes were always on Angela's mind, and each day she worked, she did it for both of them. The bus ride was the same route she'd taken for months to get to the cafe, but the destination now was different. She wasn't going to serve coffee today. She was going to a meeting, one that she would actually be leading. Robert had told her the previous afternoon. He said that Angela was ready to handle the project entirely on her own, and that it was time for her to step up. He believed in her, and Angela was determined not to let him down. She arrived at the office, her heart pounding. Erin was at her desk, and she waved as Angela walked by. "You've got this today," she called, giving Angela a thumbs up. Angela smiled back, her nerves settling slightly. It helped to know that she had people rooting for her. She walked to her desk, setting down her bag, and took a moment to go through her notes again. She wanted to make sure she had every detail memorized, every fact, every number. There was no room for mistakes today. The meeting was at 10 a.m., and as the time approached, Angela felt her stomach twist with anxiety. But she took a deep breath, reminding herself of everything she'd done so far. She had faced challenges, and she had made it through each one. Today would be no different. At 9:55, she stood, grabbing her notebook and making her way to the conference room. Robert was already there, seated at the end of the table. He looked up as she entered, giving her a nod. "Ready, Angela?" he asked, his voice calm. Angela nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "Ready as I'll ever be." Robert smiled. "You'll do great. Just remember, take your time and trust yourself. You know this material better than anyone." The client representatives entered a few minutes later, and Angela stood to greet them, shaking hands and exchanging introductions. She felt the nerves tighten in her stomach, but she forced herself to smile, to stand tall. As everyone took their seats, Robert gave her a small nod, indicating that it was time for her to begin. Angela took a deep breath, standing at the head of the table, her hands resting on her notes. She glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of each person there. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the anxiety swirling inside her. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Angela Martinez, and I've been working on this project for the past week. I'm excited to share with you the plan we've put together, and I'm confident that it's going to be a great solution for your needs. She launched into her presentation, her voice clear as she explained the logistics of the project, the steps they would be taking, and the benefits it would bring. She walked them through the timeline, the contingency plans, and the expected outcomes. She could feel her hands shaking slightly, but she kept them steady, focused on her notes. As she spoke, Angela felt the tension slowly start to ease. She knew this material. She had spent hours on it, making sure everything was perfect. And now, as she presented it, she realized that she did belong here. She was capable of this. The client representatives listened intently, nodding at times, asking questions. Angela answered each one, her voice gaining confidence with each response. Robert watched from the end of the table, his eyes never leaving her. She could see the pride in his expression, and it gave her the strength she needed to keep going. When she finished, she took a deep breath, looking around the room. Thank you all for your time. If you have any further questions, I'd be happy to answer them. One of the client representatives, a tall man with gray hair, nodded, a smile on his face. That was excellent, Angela. You've clearly put a lot of thought into this. We're very pleased with the plan. Angela felt a rush of relief, her heart swelling. She smiled, nodding. Thank you, I'm glad to hear that. The meeting wrapped up, and as the clients left, Robert walked over to Angela, placing a hand on her shoulder. You did fantastic, Angela. You handled that like a pro. Angela let out a breath, her smile widening. Thank you, Robert. I was so nervous, but I think it went well. Robert nodded. It more than went well. You showed them that you're capable, that you belong here. I'm proud of you. Angela felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back, her chest filling with a sense of accomplishment. I couldn't have done it without your support. Robert gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. You did this, Angela. You put in the work, and it shows. Keep it up. That evening, when Angela got home, Maria was waiting at the kitchen table, as always. But this time there was something different. 2 candles, their small flames flickering, and a simple dinner of pasta laid out. Angela blinked, surprised. What's all this? She asked, setting her bag down. Maria stood up, her smile wide. A celebration. For you. For everything you've done. You've been working so hard, and I wanted to do something special. Angela felt tears welling up, her throat tightening. She walked over, pulling Maria into a tight hug. Thank you, Maria. You didn't have to do this. Maria hugged her back, her voice soft. You deserve it. I'm so proud of you, Angela. You're doing amazing. Angela pulled back, her eyes glistening. She looked at the table, at the effort Maria had put into making this small moment special, and she felt her heart swell. I'm trying to do this for both of us, you know? To make things better. Maria nodded, her eyes full of emotion. And you are. You already have. You're giving us both a better life. Angela took a deep breath, her chest aching with emotion. She sat down at the table, Maria sitting across from her, and they began to eat. The food was simple, but it tasted better than anything Angela could remember. It was the taste of hope, of progress, of everything she had worked so hard for. As they finished eating, Maria looked at her, her eyes serious. Angela, I've been thinking, maybe it's time I got a part-time job, to help out. You've been carrying everything, and I want to contribute too. Angela shook her head, her voice gentle but firm. No, Maria. I want you to focus on school. That's what's important right now. I'm doing this so you don't have to worry about anything else. Maria looked at her, her eyes softening. But I want to help, Angela. I want to make things easier for you." Angela reached across the table, taking her sister's hand. "You already do. Just by being here, by believing in me. That's enough. Let me do this, okay? Let me take care of you." Maria's eyes filled with tears and she nodded. "Okay, but if you ever need anything, you have to promise you'll tell me." Angela smiled, her heart full. "I promise." The next day at work, Angela felt a shift. It was subtle, but it was there. The people around her greeted her with more respect. The looks they gave her were less skeptical. She could feel it, the slow, gradual acceptance. She was no longer just the new girl, no longer just the waitress who had somehow landed a management position. She was Angela Martinez, and she was earning her place. The days continued, each one bringing new challenges, new lessons. Angela faced them head-on, her confidence growing with each passing week. She made mistakes, of course. Everyone did. But each mistake was a lesson, a chance to learn and grow. And Robert was always there, offering guidance, support, and encouragement. One afternoon, Robert called her into his office. Angela stepped inside, closing the door behind her, her curiosity piqued. Robert looked up, a smile on his face. "Angela, I wanted to talk to you about something," he began, gesturing for her to sit. Angela sat down, her hands resting in her lap. "What is it?" Robert leaned forward, his expression serious but warm. "There's an opportunity coming up, a new position that's opening in our department. It's a step up from what you're doing now. More responsibilities, but I think you're ready for it. I wanted to offer it to you." Angela blinked, her heart skipping a beat. "A promotion?" Robert nodded. "Yes. It won't be easy. There will be a lot to learn, and it will be a challenge. But I believe in you, Angela. I think you're ready for this next step." Angela felt her throat tighten, her chest swelling with emotion. She thought about everything that had led her here, her struggles, her fears, the long days at the cafe, the sleepless nights worrying about bills. She thought about her father, about the life he had lived, about the sacrifices he had made. And she thought about Maria, sitting at the kitchen table, studying, believing in her. Angela took a deep breath, looking at Robert, her eyes filled with determination. "I want to keep growing, Robert. I want to keep learning. I'll take the position." Robert's smile widened, and he nodded. "I knew you would. Congratulations, Angela. You've earned this." Angela stood, shaking his hand, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Thank you. I won't let you down." Robert nodded, his expression filled with pride. "I know you won't." As Angela left his office, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She was scared, yes, but she was also ready. She had faced her fears, she had pushed through the doubts, and she had found her place. She was growing, one step at a time, and she knew that she was capable of so much more. When she got home that night, she told Maria about the promotion. Her sister's face lit up, and she hugged Angela tightly, tears of pride in her eyes. "You did it, Angela. You really did it." Angela hugged her back, her heart full. "We did it, Maria. Together." And for the first time in a long time, Angela felt like she was finally moving forward, no longer just surviving, but truly living. One step at a time, she was creating the life she had always dreamed of, and she knew deep down that her journey was just beginning.